What is up, my friends? This is the Protect Your Neck podcast, and I'm your host, Dan Tom. And this is where you can find over at MMA Junkie, as well as the ActionNetwork.com. But on this here program, the Protect Your Neck podcast, we break down high-level MMA in a slightly different and I would say better way, because I have co-hosts with me tonight, whenever you're listening to this. We're live after the fight, free and live after the fight. I should have been doing this the whole time, to the point of my co-host here, Feno, at Feno X Guy, who is my usual co-host with it. And we're gonna do like a weird little, we got the Fenyo's gonna be sandwiched by two Dans here, because speaking of co-hosts, Fenyo's a longtime co-host for the Full Preview podcast. Again, one of the best ones, especially when it had this man on there. That is, of course, Dan Albert. He's been a co-host on this show as well. He's missed here as well. At Typewriting DA. What's up? What's up, Dan? First of all, welcome, dude.
Yo, I will be taking glasses off and on in case I need to read something. So for those wondering what kind of schizophrenia is going on here, that's what's going on.
Nice. No worries. We got people piling into the chat. What's up, Tony C? You had my guy Tony hit me with a. I always love when people have a good impression that you don't realize they have, and he hit me with a Zellhuber. I guess the German Zellhuber, yeah, has been catching on, so shout out to Tony. Of course, we got my man Ghost Feno, who was on the Breakdown show. We're going to be referencing Ghost because a lot of the analysis he gave on the show aged well. A lot of Feno's analysis, I know, and picks aged well. And we're going to pick Dan's brain for both what he had pre and as well as kind of what he thought going out of the matchup. So I'm probably going to be, heads up, Dan, I'm probably going to be going to you first on a lot of these fights, at least the top fights especially. I know you were...
I did see most of them. I think I only missed two of them, but I was able to catch Van and, was it Chavez? Chavez? I don't know.
Chavez? Chavez?
I'm very bad with names, so correct me constantly.
Well, we got Feno on the podcast to make sure we're coming correct. Yeah. Yes, yeah. It was funny. Report in the chat. Pop in the chat. Okay, cool. Let's do that. All right. Feno? Yeah. All right, cool. Let's go there. Sorry, folks. Dan, you want to give us a mic check? And now you guys can compare Dan to me, and we'll just roll forward from here, folks. Apologies.
Did you all know vice versa? Vice versa is versa vice. Fuck, I messed up this. Damn it. Okay.
How does that sound, folks? At least the double Dan here. At least we is this okay for levels? All right. Hopefully, while the chat just answers one more, and we'll get on. Hopefully, we're good here. But yeah, basically, I was saying that I agree with like a radio guest. Yeah, I don't know how to do that. I don't want to take any more time for that, Ronan Curtis. But let us know if we're sounding. If we're sounding okay. Cool. Yes, you and Dan. It's nice to see look at Sound of Violence in here. So happy. So what's up, Pulver? And Chris in spirit as well. Not that Chris is dead. I'm just assuming it's Pulver. But yeah, cool, guys. Basically, Dan, I was saying I agree with Feno where like it was like better at first. And then like by the end, like as far as the ring card girls, I was gonna say like, yeah, like I was getting the theme, like it was like as time progressed or whatever. So I'm like, okay, I kind of get why they waited to the main card, because like that would have been a lot of work to have, like, to divvy up the worlds even more into 10 sections as opposed to 5 or 4, right? But I was like, they could have just like maybe gave us some dinosaurs in the beginning, maybe just gone anti-evolution and had caveman riding the dinosaurs just to piss people off, That would have been a good laugh.
I just kept thinking, like, are they producing the next Star Wars film? And is it going to have lower ratings than the last one at this point? But then again, that's my way of taking a shot at a fandom I don't like too much. So hopefully nobody understands that reference. And speaking of references, nobody will understand. There's one coming later, and I am so sorry.
No, please. That's like Mike the King. I do like old reference. I'll do old references, stupid references, anything. So you're fine. You probably won't outdo me, so you're good. But it did kind of look like the inside of the Death Star for more kind of surface level Star Wars comparisons. But as far as the ring girls, I did think it was funny that by the end they're in a modern city when O'Malley and Merab, which is of course who headlined this fight, folks, UFC 306. That's what we're going to be recapping after the rough start. I'll try to edit this out for the maybe the video for the Substack and the free preview. But yeah, I'm making this free, and then this might be locked up afterwards for members. But just to get some participation, reward you guys for staying up like savages, reward you for engaging with my show and caring. Let's all figure let's open it up, make it free here. But by the time they made a city, I loved how they were just like they just had like a girl who like she was like cyberpunk. They're like cyberpunk Mexicans like cyberpunk. All right, like they were just like throwing stuff at the wall. But by the end there, it kind of felt like. But yeah, that was it. But yeah, before the audio stuff, I'm gonna see if I got any what you guys thought. But as far as the fight goes, Dan, while I'm gonna comb through to see how people in the chat felt about this Sphere production, we're gonna be pushing on here, and you start us off by letting me know both how. I guess what were your thoughts going in? I don't know if you went so far as to make a pick. I know that's not like what analysis is, obviously, but as far as what your feels or expectations in the main event, O'Malley versus Merab was, and then obviously what you felt coming out of it.
Yeah, I think the main event was super intriguing as far as how it played out and on paper, especially on paper, because I didn't think it was going to be a good fight, but I did think it was going to be a very interesting dynamic. Overall, I think looking at it as an encapsulation of kind of where bantamweight has gone the last few years, there's kind of building towards it is a good way to start, because no matter what, these were the two best bantamweights in the world, so to speak. We got to this point. It was a contrast of styles where both guys had fought some similar archetypes to each other, but really like they were so like different in granular ways. So you have a guy who plays the long roll sniper. You have a guy who plays just this janky, physical freak of nature, smothering, annoying wrestler archetype. But they matched up in interesting ways where you can kind of see one of them needs to hurt the other, one of them needs to smother the other. My prediction, I picked O'Malley, and that was wrong. But I think the main thing with analytics as far as any kind of discussion of it is reflecting upon it. Why did you come to that conclusion? And when the thing happens, what did you learn from it? So my immediate response to that fight, where, in case you didn't watch it, Merab Dvalishvili won a decision, was I think the biggest takeaway that everybody needs to have is Sarah Longo reinforced again that they're some of the best game planners in MMA. And it especially revolves around how they manage the fence. So the whole idea for their approach is they want to get the opponent over to the fence area. Or yeah, how they do that is archetyped by their fighters. They've been doing it since Weidman. They've been doing it since Aljo, and they've been doing it with Merab, but it's always in a different way. With Merab's whole thing was that he didn't want to go into a certain distance with Sean, so he's willing to feint on the outside, but they picked up the fact that Sean would retreat in straight lines, because basically what happened was it was a game of chicken, and if Merab came right in, he risked getting countered, but he made it a habit that if Sean tried anything coming in, Merab was willing to throw back exactly when that happened. And I think that more than anything spooked O'Malley and resulted in the fight we got, because then Merab could slowly, surely pressure him back to that fence, and then he would explode in for that like entry. And O'Malley attempted things, but I think that big thing alone, just not feeling comfortable having an entry point, really decided the fight, so to speak. Now, I do think there's a caveat. Namely that I don't think O'Malley jabbed enough or tried establishing a jab enough, but I understand from the perspective of he maybe just never felt comfortable doing it. But I think the outcome for how Merab won it didn't surprise me too much as the other alternative call for what I could have been wrong with. As far as things I was wrong about with O'Malley, I gave him a bit too much credit on the counter. I definitely gave him too much credit with some of his defensive footwork. He crossed his feet a lot this time, and I think a lot of his strategic decisions kind of revealed to me that he really, really needs to kind of have some vibing kind of level of control. But I think I do think there were some positives. Like, I think he reinforced that, like, he's one of the better, like, cage general technicians. He's very adamant about reinforcing his feints and working the body. He's great at initiative, but he was kind of in there against someone who had a physical advantage and also just had a better execution of strategy. And that's really it. Merab Dvalishvili is not one of my favorite fighters. I don't really like his style. So I'm not going to lie, I'm not too happy about the outcome, but he earned it, and he's the best bantamweight in the world, and it's going to require a very good fighter to beat him.
Yeah, that's the thing about counters is when they don't work, it's really easy to say that, maybe we overlooked, not overlooked, but, overrated it, for lack of a better word. But to be fair, I thought you put out some really good analysis on Sean O'Malley, those hop steps and how he uses those in conjunction with the lead hand and measuring distance. I was sharing that out earlier this week. That was really good, Dan. But you're right, and I want to shout out Miguel Class, who shared a thing out as far as like a quick quip of his pick just today on Fight Day. As far as like, and I'm sure he said it before in his podcast. Shout out to Miguel, by the way. Support him on Patreon. But he pointing to that clip though specifically. He talks exactly about what you were saying there, Dan, as far as moving in a straight line and then being able to spot that. And I wish there was some kind of analogy for like some kind of animal where like, or plant even, if that makes sense, where like it's always, it's very durable and it's always, essentially ready to attack. It's like even when it's sleeping, it's dangerous kind of a deal. Because where I'm going with that is what you're saying is true, but also incorporating the critiques on Merab's game where he's not your, stereotypical paintbrush, always moving forward to whatever degree of technicality or effectiveness withstanding, but always moving forward religiously. It's like, well, not necessarily, right? But Merab will take the back foot. There's plenty of times he took the back foot in this fight and in his other fights. You could argue that he's trended doing it more since splitting time and working with Syndicate MMA while he's in Las Vegas. However, to your point, Dan, it never became as big of a problem as perhaps some of us might have thought it was, right? Even those of us that picked Merab were worried about that. Because, to your point, every time Sean did something, he made sure that there was that threat there, whether it was a level-changing look, counter, some kind of a reaction to kind of help mute that. And because of that, it's like, yeah, well, he doesn't necessarily need to be good at tracking you down. It's just like you're stuck in a cage with something that is always, even, when Merab's unconscious, as we saw in the Ricky Simon Bato fight, right, where he was like got put out with the guillotine. He's his bicycle kicking off of instinct. Like, I really think you have to like one of those like zombie movies, or I'm sure there's a good video game analogy here, Dan, where you're just having to dismember it completely the zombie, for it to finally die. Like it just won't die, like
Resident Evil 4.
There we go. Merab's just one of those guys, like that's the and I think those analogies are probably useful, especially not just for analysis, but as far as any of the MMA gamblers out there, right? Like, do you really want to bet, not just bet against, but in a dynamic where the fighter in O'Malley arguably has to get the stoppage against somebody built, out of a lab or out of, that's going to just be a mutant like that, That's tough, and on the opposite side, even though I'm not going to be Mr. Hindsight. Like, yeah, I didn't feel like I'm going to keep the same energy. I didn't feel great about my Merab pick or bet there, Dan. But at the same time, if you are going to pick someone, or God forbid, if you're crazy enough to bet on this sport, it doesn't hurt.
You got to take risks sometimes.
Yeah,
you
and
just
also
got to take risks.
That's true, but it also doesn't hurt to bet someone that's going to fight for your money. In other words, right? Like to bet on that said mutant, right, so to speak. Because it's like, okay, they could lose, but they're going to fight for my dollar. Like, you could be missing a leg, and he's still going to be coming forward. You get what I'm saying, Dan?
Yeah, for sure. I think, like, one thing that's super important about this is, like, I've said before, I think some fights Merab has had is kind of embellished or flattered him a little bit as far as stuff that he's has weaknesses for. And I think this fight proved that, because what's the first thing O'Malley looked to punish? Well, he looked to punish Merab's linearity on the outside at the very beginning. But I think this fight further reinforced, again, just the biggest takeaway of this fight should be for everyone just how smart Sarah Longo are as a camp for game planning, period. Because they've constantly proved time and again with their fighters that they understand how their fighters operate, and they allocate like the most minimalist, effective. Minimalist is a really good word for this. The simplest solution for the best conclusion.
Yeah.
Like Occam's razor, basically.
Yep.
And that's exactly what they do for Merab. It's like, we're not going to let our guy exchange with Sean O'Malley, so we'll make O'Malley come to him, throw when he throws to make him uncomfortable. Oh, don't push anything until he's at a set point that our guy can explode in, and there's a tie-up. Up, and then we rely on our guys' better attributes to win. It's a very simple, effective game plan, and they make it work. Their guys have a ton of like technical issues with their footwork, a lot of striking issues, but they game plan effectively every single time, or most of the time.
Yeah.
It's a testament to them.
I still don't like, though, as far as like, I get like it's not Merab's style to put the hooks in and completely sell out. He's got the attritional game, let you up, take you down again. But the creating space, like for them, like make them earn those separations. I feel like when they get to a certain point, Merab's way too quick to separate, and then here's where I'll criticize him going on the back foot. Then he'll go on the back foot on top of it. Like, what are you doing? Why'd you just give up all that work? Why did you just reset yourself to that nth degree? And usually he's way up ahead at that point, and I think he's just in kind of his crazy flow state. I really don't think he's thinking about it. I think he's kind of just in the sparring room. This is probably just what Merab does, right? But to a point that I know I wasn't alone. Many people were saying, as well as in this very chat, shows how smart some of the people in the chat were, and we were all saying that the front kicks were going to be a big part of O'Malley's success, and he didn't throw it until the very end, and we saw how effective they were, to the credit of anybody citing that analysis, and I guess I dare say to the credit of the point I previously made as far as being critical on Merab, right? Because that wouldn't have happened if he didn't do that, because those front kicks in round 5 came right after one of those scenarios I just talked about, where letting them up is fine, but giving them away the separation and then accentuating the separation for them. Like, why would you do that? And it almost led to a potential into the fight. He was getting stung to the body. You know what I'm talking about there at the end, Dan?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think like I always wonder why there are some fighters who don't follow the whole McGregor-Mendez policy of taking away their wind with front kicks, or like the Rory McDonald. Rory McDonald was really adamant about doing that too. But I also, Tony Ferguson actually too, low key. But I also think that it's easier said than done, because like the kind of grindy archetypal wrestler with the high pace kind of gets into the guys' minds that they have to be very careful and pick their spots. And so I sort of understand why O'Malley didn't throw many kicks here. At least not till he had Merab officially cornered. But yeah, there's always a part of me that just goes, and maybe it's just my inexperience, so to speak, or my limited experience thereof with sparring and competition, but just sometimes I think we as the viewers do assume a little too much as compared to what's actual reality for some of these fighters. So we can say in hindsight, but I don't know. I think that's a good way of summing it up.
Yep. Speaking of summing it up, we'll sum up this fight and jump to the next one. But I just want to finish with this and plant seeds for points down the road here, which is again, refs are trained to, same with judges, right? They're trained to ignore, the crowd and stuff. We don't care who the promotion likes. We don't care who the crowd's cheering for. We call everything down the line. And in a perfect world, right? That's how it's supposed to go, right? And you had a lot of people like myself, especially in the media, or been around for a minute, that's going like, listen, folks, take the tinfoil hats off. Like, the judges are not, being swayed or paid or this or that, or there's no funny business or this or that. But it's funny whether we're talking about like the I think it was like the Saudi card, and you look at like some really questionable stuff that was going on from the judges to the refs and who it was. It was coincidentally always to the promotional darlings, the favorites, so to speak. There was a lot of that here. We'll talk about the Mexicans.
I didn't see any of that, but I wasn't paying attention.
Well,
but I believe you. So.
Well, I was gonna say
Yeah.
I don't want to go with like the past events or whatever. But me and Fenya were talking about like like whether it was like the Shara bullet fights or like some other fights. But for this one, they were letting the Mexicans go out on their shield, right? Like they were. You look at like we'll get to Lazy Boy Rodriguez round 1. We'll get to Zell Huber round 3, right? Like the promotional, so to speak, like they were given like crazy long leashes, right? And then for this fight, it wasn't so much a long leash, but we had the Herb Dean doing work to the commentary.
Herb Dean is an anomaly because that dude will. I don't know what his deal is. I'm sure he was just told, "Hey, Herb, you need to focus," meaning take your ADHD medication, please. No, wait, that'd be ADD actually. But yeah. So, gosh, yeah, I don't have much to say. Herb's always been kind of a weird ref, but yeah, I've noticed it too. Like refs were given a ton of hands-off approach. I would definitely say there's some weirdness with all that. What with the next fight we're going to talk about, because I have some things to say about that one.
Yeah, but, yeah. Let's get into that. But let me just clean up the chat, and because they've been contributing, I want to pay them off, especially if they have stuff related to this fight. Alexander Volkar Francis, huge miss not to induct any of the fighters into the Hall of Fame of this year. Ahem, Demetrius Johnson. That would have been cool. For sure. I just hope they kind of do more. Tony C says, I miss my Donnie Clifton pick. Tony C's a member of the Dan Clan here, where this is usually behind the wall and whatnot, and you get little like avatar picks. I don't know what Tony C's up to now, but yeah, there's like random. It goes like Nate Diaz. There's Neo. I know Kung Fu. He's like the second tier. Michael Caine's in there for some reason. It's probably just because people I do impressions of Dan. So it's just really we got like weird film references in there. But that's
okay.
There we go. Super chat. Thank you, Super chat. Super chat donation from Exercise Waterheart. Hope you guys had a pleasant night. Thank you so much. I always, even though Burgundy will read the prompter, folks. Anyways, I always feel like I'm gonna be Mo from The Simpsons. I'm like, I get excited. I'm like, ooh, super chat, but then I'm like, oh, I'm probably gonna get trolled by something because that's where my head goes. But no, thank you for that. Appreciate it. I hope you had a pleasant night as well. Of course, The Sound of Violence. Always love hearing from these guys. I'm just happy they didn't put a sombrero on every ring girl because culture, to be honest. Yeah, I wasn't trying to do my usual ring the bell of be Buzz Killington as far as the cultural appropriation goes, but yeah, it was definitely an excuse for all those things. Tennessee, I've earned Nate Diaz. Oh, that's right, Nate Diaz right now, motherfucker. Nate Diaz. I don't know where Nate was at. I think Nate's in London right now. Phantom Punch breakdowns for Marab. I like the Turk he was looking for, and the wrist right along the fence in the third round. That was really nice, Ghost Phantom. Phantom Punch breakdowns.
So real quick, for those listening, I am not a wrestling or grappling analyst by any means. I'm good at inferring stuff and decent at like saying what I see, but as far as like identifying technical terms, that is not my strong suit, so I'm going to defer to Dan on stuff here.
One of my favorite things about Dan A over here, Dan Albert, is so I'm not trying to put pressure on you, Dan, but it's just I pop for it. Is whenever you do any kind of video game analogy, those are like really effective. I know they're both unique and effective. I really love it, nerd out on those. Phantom Punch Breakdown says, what I really wanted Marab to do is go to the body after Deshaun broke the clinch along the fence. Yeah, I think body work is fair to say both fighters could have done more of. Sound of Violence says, going in my thoughts where Sean has a minute and a half to establish the center. Exactly, round and a half. Marab has some Frankie Edgar meets Sarah meets Caro in his wrestling and footwork and pressure. I love those old school references there. For sure. And they says it's both expected and still catches dudes being reactionary. Long Island #1. Alexander Volkar France said. 100% agree with Marab Breaks. It has Jim Reset feels. Sound of Violence said, okay, not crazy there. And Herb Dean was horrible today. Yeah, I can't remember which other ones he was off the top of my head, but yeah, asking Marab to work from dominant positions was silly. And again, I don't think, obviously, like, oh, Herb was in on the fix, sort of. But again, it's just when you have all these coincidences over and over, it makes them look bad. That's all I'm saying. As somebody who actually will defend the refs and the judges. So I'm not trying to witch hunt here. Rios in Truesdale says, did you hear Joe Rogan go Herb is the gold standard to what the fuck is he talking about? No, I didn't hear him make that turn quite that fast, but if there's a funny audio clip, feel free to say that. And lastly but not leastly, then we'll jump to the co-main. Sound of Violence says, Herb asked dudes in the 2000s to do less work on top and guard. Yeah, it was really weird. Really weird how they were going. Oh, thank you for the super chat donation, Sound of Violence. You guys are way too kind. It says, this is a contribution to the Dan Whiskey Fund. I don't need whiskey. And to be honest,
I haven't had whiskey. I've been sober for nearly 3 years, so wait. I had some
you had some fun. Ago. Yeah, you had some fun a little bit ago on Twitter. No, it's good. You deserved it. I've been actually pretty good, and between my voice and the fact that I didn't win again, that's been saving me on the whiskey because usually I have some when I win, and that's the good news about this losing streak. Is I don't have to drink much, but yeah. So I hope your thoughts are still warm, Dan. They didn't go cold for the co-main event. Valentina Shevchenko gets her title back, and they go 1-1-1 now. And that's my biggest fear. I posted the you never go full Figgy Moreno, but that may be where we're headed. But no disagreeing with the result. What were your thoughts on, I guess, going into the fight again and then coming out of it, Dan?
Well, so I hadn't rewatched Fight 1 and 2 in a while, so I did that earlier today.
Okay.
And they were surprisingly better than I remembered. I think Fight 1's okay, and I think Fight 2's actually good. So I was like, you know what? Grasso might be able to force an exciting fight out of Shevchenko. 20 minutes later, I'm so sorry. But so Shevchenko, good old Connor Rubrish wrote the whole, she stinks up a joint with the whole thing, so yeah, I can't add too much more to that. The thing that fascinates me about Valentina actually is her stance, and I'm going to make a bit of a boxing history nerd thing at this point. Ghost already knows what I'm talking about because I've already DM'd him about this. So there's this boxer named Vicente Saldívar, and Saldívar's whole gimmick was that he would do next to nothing with his stance and stuff, and then all of a sudden he would land the most accurate 10-punch combo you've ever heard or seen in your life, and you're like, how the fuck does he do that? And Valentina has that one posture where she's like this, just vibrating back and forth, not doing anything. And I'm convinced that's what she's trying to do, except she doesn't know volume or doesn't have much of an active jab. So in that first fight with Grasso, she gets freaked out because it's like, oh shit, someone can box with me. And so in Fight 2, she figures out, hey, I can lead more. But she still gets into enough trouble that it ends up being a close fight. Because her modus operandi for getting things done is okay, I'm going to hit you, and then I'm going to get a takedown to spoil any fun. Hooray! And then she gets into trouble. This fight was literally just that, because Grasso had no idea how to get any entries going. And I don't know what Grasso's deal is. I'm not as familiar as probably Feno would have been. But what's very weird about it is her whole game plan just seemed to be I'm going to respond to these whole takedown situations and just opportunistically look for things. But Valentina never gave her anything, would always jab, pair with kicks, etc. And then just got a takedown, and then we would be stuck in purgatory listening to DC and Joe Rogan telling us something was in when it wasn't 10,000 times. And again, I am not a grappling terminology guy, but I've watched enough that I know when something's in, and none of them were in. And then there's the whole Valentina herself stays on top, does nothing, absolutely nothing. It's insanity. Whereas Grosso goes for submissions that are halfway in or don't get, and we're stuck in purgatory for 25 minutes straight, where we get commentary gem after gem. My personal two favorites
Here we
were
go. Yes. All right.
in round number 4, or DC. I think no, wait, it's Joe Rogan actually. Rogan goes, in spite of the fact that Valentina's done like nothing on top, uh, Grosso's got the submissions, but she's probably still losing the round because Valentina's on top, which killed me.
Yeah, I think I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's, you're right, Ghost. She did not look for that wall walk. And then my other favorite one is in round 5 at the very end. They're like trying to go, okay, so we have a Figueiredo Moreno situation for a fight number 4, inevitably. How do we sell this? Their solution is, well, I guess it was dominant, so why would we need a 4th one?
They don't want it either. It's so hilarious. Yeah,
it's so good. Like I'm not a fan of the UFC commentary booth. Everybody knows this about me who listens to me, because I think they're podcasting and not being professional. But oh my gosh, if there was a perfect commentary series of events for Purgatory that was this fight, that would be it.
I love my guy Anik, so I will always defend him. But I think he was.
I will defend Anik
always,
too.
He was always having to do traffic control, especially on a night like this. I feel like he had to be even tighter. It felt like for him. So which I get, but so to your point though, which that subsequently meant we got more of DC and Rogan. To your point, and I will say DC had a good point though that I agreed with in that fight where it did feel like he was saying it felt like training, which was true in a more broad sense. And me, not hating on Diego Lopez, obviously, I do like him, even though I feel like a lot of the analysts don't, because he does. And I get it, because I'm the same way too. I'm more about process-based fighters and this and that, and he doesn't really have that or whatever. And he is talented enough to play from bottom, but then again, if you're a good enough wrestler like a Evloev who can stay out of submissions, you can prevent problems, right? So in other words, even for him, it's a high-risk game. It's a high-risk game in MMA in general. And for Grasso to kind of, inherit those sensibilities where she's just attacking from bottom, even in a perfect world where it should be scored the way maybe I or you, the proverbial you out there, think that as far as, rewarding bottom more, rewarding submission catches more, something I always talk about, right? Even then, I'm not comfortable with that. If it's a fighter I want to win the fight, or a fighter I want to bank rounds, right? So it just felt like a really, she was getting frustrated toward the end, but you almost got no one to blame but but yourself. I know it's easier said than done, but there was a lot more submission tactics than there were get up tactics. So, yeah. Not much to say about that fight. I had Grasso. I had fight goes to split. And it was well beyond even having like a bad split decision scorecard where you have the one random rogue judge. We weren't getting any of that here. I wish we would. Again, I wish the tinfoil hat stuff was real, because in that case we probably would have had the one rogue judge like in boxing, who gives the completely different scorecard, right, Dan? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah. Most people will never forget 118, 110 Canelo. I think that's the most recent one, but. Oh, on the subject of commentators, let us not forget that John Anik is the man, because he couldn't help himself. You could tell he was on a leash for this. But when Jones Miocic was announced, he did get that Tom Aspinall comment at the very end.
Nice.
And that was very beautiful. Oh.
Nice. Yeah, he does those subtle things like that. That's what I love about John.
Yeah. And we would, of course, be even more remiss to not, speaking of boxing greats, not honor Kendrick Lamar, formerly known as Terrence Crawford.
Dude, it was bad. Like I was like, oh, because I was like in my head, I'm like, oh, that's Terrence Crawford. But then for a split second, I do the Dan, are you being racist and you're mistaking Terrence Crawford for someone else? And as soon as I'm auditing myself, if I'm being racist, sure enough, the UFC screen says Kendrick Lamar. I'm like, come on.
Did you
Why
know
am I?
Kendrick Lamar is now challenging Canelo via recording?
Oh my god.
Amazing. Not only does he have a hater phase for the Drake dude, he now also is trying to fight a very popular Mexican boxer who won his match tonight fairly dominantly.
I
So
can't.
congratulations.
I can't remember who he was with the photo right now, but
It was it,
who was it?
it was the Prince of Saudi Arabia. It was
Okay.
Turkey.
Oh, jeez. Well, that kind of takes away from the joke because that's a whole other comment in itself, right? But
Yes.
it felt very like Stephen Colbert. I have a black friend where they're just like they don't even care who the celebrity. They're just getting it wrong. Like, oh my god, come on. Like even old UFC bad production was able to get their Carmen Electra cutaways correctly. You know what I'm saying? Uh, so that was funny. Let me do the chat. We'll move on to the next fights here and to push through with this. I know it's late, folks. Thank you guys for joining this. Yeah, Ghost Phantom said go read Dan A's piece on Vicente Saldivar. He's giving you a shout there. Sound of Violence says, wait, Valentina got that decision? I went to grab a beer during the decision. Yeah, you didn't miss much, Pulver. You didn't miss much, dude. Let's see here. Sound of Violence says, where were the let's work pressure for stand-ups in the Valentina versus Grasso, though? Yeah, that is true, because if they wanted the Mexican fighter there, they would have maybe... But that was a different referee. That was Jason Herzog, right? Or was it? I don't believe it was Herb Dean, though, because I don't think they would work Herb Dean back to back. So maybe that was it. So like Dan said, Herb Dean kind of will just go on his own sometimes. Rios is in Truesdale. We hate the commentary booth as well, DA. We hate the commentary booth as well, DA. They're seconding you there. You are not alone, Rios is in Truesdale says. Ronan Curtis. Cormier literally said, if I was Valentina, I would be trying to make sure this fight doesn't happen again. That's hilarious. Jin Karasu, Grasso didn't even threaten to get up. Hip bump sweep. Just weird showing by Grasso. Yeah, it's like she that camp traditionally had very terrible, poor showings against Southpaws, which is why I picked against Grasso the first time. And then, she showed she could make things happen and match it. Looks like she found an answer there. And was able to, it looked like she was getting more comfortable, in fact, like shifting. Like, it looks like a 1-2-3 she drops Valentina with in the second fight, but it was a kind of like it wasn't like Dustin Poirier, but the same, basic mechanics of a southpaw 1-2 to step to set up a orthodox right cross.
Part of it, and sorry to interrupt you, is because Valentina doesn't really have an active pivot. So when she gets into longer exchanges and someone hooks at her, it's far easier to catch her like that. So and she didn't have a pivot here either, but like for someone who relies upon the check hook, she could really benefit from a pivot, to be honest. In fact, I could say that of Mr. O'Malley too, to be honest, or everyone. Everybody needs to pivot. Yeah,
absolutely. Starting that discourse again. Shout out to Miguel there. You know what she did do for not having the check hook and kind of controlling that approach, though, like you would with the checking shot? Well, not like it's not like a checking shot. It's actually just an attachment and a combo, but it's hitting around the guard and covering that same side as the southpaw right hook would. But it's a combo that I work with my coach a lot. Where I love it. It's like it's not like your typical just basic like it's a 1-2-1, but not really like Nate Diaz Cerrone's like your classic 1-2-1, right down the center line 1-2-1. He was just hitting 1-2-1s that whole fight. Nate Diaz on Donald Cerrone, and I'm referencing an old UFC fight. But Valentina did one where it was, and again, it's almost like what I described Grasso do, where it'd be like 1-2, and you're throwing you're stepping forward in orthodox and throwing a right cross. But imagine you kind of keep that punching mechanics of a cross, but you're staying in your southpaw stance with your 1-2-1. So you're throwing your 1, your 2 straight, and your 3. It's almost like an old school Rich Franklin jab, a Rich Franklin southpaw jab where it's coming over an arc and down. So your 1 straight forward, 2 straight forward to camera, right? And then your third punch, it's coming boom, which is coming right over here. And Valentina hit Grasso with that a couple times and was just able to freeze her up at range and really just, I don't know what it was. I'm not going to, speculate too much because I don't know. But yeah, I don't want to, even though it wasn't the most impressive performance, I don't want to take away from Valentina. But yeah, it was a weird performance from Grasso. I guess that's all I got to say on that. Dan?
Yeah, that's about all I gotta say. It was a really boring fight. 0 out of 10. Would not recommend.
Ghost fan of the Saudis actually paid for that Terrence Crawford Kendrick Lamar fumble in production. Oh Jesus Christ!
That's
He sponsored
unreal.
it. Yeah, Jesus. All right. So the next fight we had Diego Lopez defeated Brian Ortega. Another one that everyone who's probably calling the front kick read was also probably tracking that Brian Ortega has not been taking damage well. And I think that showed up here. He didn't get it done inside the distance, which is fine. That was just what I picked. It's not what I bet. I just had Diego Lopez in a parlay, which did hit. I had that parlayed with Grasso Shevchenko over because I did respect Valentina Shevchenko's chances despite picking and playing Grasso there to sum up that fight, I guess. But yeah, even though I called it to happen, I guess, for Ortega to continue to not take damage as well, it hits different when you see it. And I tweeted Dan, I just said, man, I do not want to see that guy in a 5-round fight, especially with anybody who knows how to throw a punch, any semblance of a puncher. What are your thoughts on this fight?
So I didn't have any thoughts prior to it, outside of the main two. Actually, you could say that for most of the fights we're going to talk about now. I do have a lot of post fights though. So yeah, I think the degradation of Ortega's durability has been apparent for a little bit. Ortega has always been an opportunistic fighter who looked for his moments more than anything else. He thrived at kind of finding that little micro thing to zero in on and usually surprise everyone with it, except Max Holloway, who kind of just beat his ass harder. Even Volkanovski kind of had a moment or two outside the famous third round where he kind of got some moments or looks from Ortega, but Ortega basically has had the prime beaten to shit out of him. And so against Lopez here, Lopez is an opportunist too, but Lopez is interesting because he mostly focuses on just a hair trigger counter, and he's really good at that. Out of the very gate, he's on fire with it. The moment someone steps in on him, he is ready to throw. But what this fight and the Ige fight kind of reinforced to me is I kind of I'm not too high on Lopez personally. I kind of think Lopez might be more one note than he looks. He's definitely super dangerous. He's very opportunistic, and he's disciplined enough to keep his composure. I assume he's probably durable, but I'm not the person to speak on that. But I don't think it's a matter of conditioning or patience that has kind of affected both his last two, where Ige and now Ortega are having success drawing a lot of punches out of him that are missing quite a bit. I think it's very, very trigger or based upon the counters itself, but I will have to watch a little bit more before I say that for certain. That's the impression I get from this fight. And on that subject, Ortega did a pretty thorough job after a disastrous opening one, using his legs on the ground to kind of get some space back. And on the feet, he kind of mixed in just a couple of tricks. I think one thing about Ortega that I think is worth mentioning is that Ortega's never really had particularly great footwork. He tends to bounce in and out on his strikes a lot. He does show some shifting work between punches. His zombie performance is probably his best display of that, but he shows some knack for punching into the opposite stance to create check hooks to close the door, and he did that here towards the very end. It's just he couldn't get any offense going with it, but he was able to prevent Lopez from doing a lot of things until Lopez found that one shot to shut him down. But I am telling you, if he had anything where he would redirect Lopez, that right hand of Lopez would not have landed half as much as it did.
Yeah. I don't disagree with any of that. And again, I understand why yourself and a lot of analysts don't feel his game. For me, it's more just the matchups that he's been in. And again, usually I'm not the hype and athletic and he's got the length and height, and he's got power, and he's opportunistic, and all these things that typically, from casual fans to pundits to bettors, these are things that work. I use the baby toy analogy. Why are all the baby toys the same concept? They're all something flashy, right, to catch your attention. Because that's who we are as human beings, right? It's the guy it's the Yair Rodriguez's with the spin kicks, right? That are going to get like the overhype, generally. Those are the fighters that their eyes kind of draw to, right? And even though he's not super flashy in that sense, Lopez, he's a very easy fighter. And I don't mean this as like a negative or like my nose in the air, but as far as like the more casual sensibilities, for a lack of a better word, and I like those too. I'm right there, folks. I'm no better, but I also get what Dan is saying, and I think it's true, and it's just so frustrating and I see people do this to a lot of fighters, especially a lot of certain kind of fighters, when you broad brush things like athleticism, right? But there are fighters, and that I feel like Diego Lopez fits the bill, where you're like, everything is there, maybe the cardio not as bad, especially considering a round 3 fighter like Ortega, even though it's clear post-prime Ortega, obviously. But yeah, there's obviously cardio questions, but outside of that, like athletically, power, submissions, attacking all 3 levels, even though he doesn't do the body nearly enough, which has always been apparent, but was really apparent in this fight because Ortega is a guy you got to go to the body on because he's so notoriously tough for the chin. And I tweeted it out. I don't know who else might have caught this, but Ortega, I know he's been more apt to grapple more, but this was definitely an out of characteristic shot in round 2, and it was because he got hurt to the body. It was one of the few times Lopez really punched to the body, and it hurt him right off the bat. Like, he was like, "Ooh, we really didn't like it." And because Ortega was fighting a better round it was around when they were talking about it, and then Ortega stopped pushing after that, the rest of that round. Did you see that, Dan, at all?
I think so. I definitely saw the leg damage, but everybody saw the leg damage.
Sure.
There was 1 or 2 times where, yeah, I definitely could tell, like, when Lopez landed something downstairs, Ortega kind of flinched at that a little bit, which is obvious, just PTSD from the Max fight, but anybody would have PTSD from that fight.
Oh yeah, well, me and Feno have a joke where we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. Later, but like I forget what fight whenever someone gets hurt to the body, DC always like has flashbacks to his Anderson Silva fight, and he's like, those kicks, man, those body shots, man.
When I first joined Twitter, this community, one of my first jokes was picking on Daniel Cormier pre-Stipe 3, and I made this image of him like where his hands are like this,
yes,
and on his gut, I wrote the words "kick me," and the subtitle was, Daniel Cormier's coaches have informed me they are drilling body shots to prepare. Well, I painted like a little red kick me sign. And I wish I still had that because I'm so proud of it.
It's so true though. Stipe found it, of course, right? And like, yeah, it was like is one of those things, and he's not wrong, right? Like, I agree with him. The body shots are crucial, right? But it's just hilarious because, like Feno was pointing out, like I forget what fight it was, but like someone was landing a bunch of body shots, like he wasn't. I think it was Chavez's body kicks. He wasn't saying anything. But as soon as Josh Van hurt Chavez to the body, he's like, he started going off but he ignored body shots like the whole time before that. And I'm like, I think it's because he has to get like triggered, right? Like he has to be triggered by seeing a fighter hurt. And then he remembers, oh shit, that works. Yeah, I remember now. But it's hilarious. All right, we'll go questions. We'll move on to the next fight. We got a good pace going on here.
Yeah, I there's some questions in the chat that I do want to answer. So Rio Sozin Truesdale has a good question. I think I can answer that.
Okay, let me go in order. Let me go in order real quick. I got Alexander Volkar, France first, real quick. Lopez has a really straightforward approach to striking, counter with punches, use transitional offense, collar ties, lead with calf kicks. You nailed it, man. I don't disagree with anything of that. Dan, didn't mean to cut you off, but before we get to Rios, do you have anything to say on that one?
Not really. I've seen some of the transitional game in like the Ige fight, but I need to watch more Lopez.
Okay, I'll let you tackle Rios and Truesdale's if you want to read that now. I'll throw it on the screen.
Sure.
Read it, Dan.
Sure. Ghost mentioned on Thursday Ortega's reliance on slipping to the rear foot position. And why do you think Lopez couldn't exploit that habit? So, the big thing about going to someone's right hand side is if they punch at you on the right hand side, you can usually read it a little better to dip under. And it's harder to track someone because they have to follow their lead foot from their lead foot. And because Lopez is waiting on you, he has to turn after you. So that's kind of why Ortega could keep sticking the jab out, and that right hand wouldn't land as much. But then you would later see Ortega switch on purpose to southpaw to throw off the timing. Because from the very beginning, Ortega would jab at the body. He would then throw a little kick off a half beat. A lot of it's just in the footwork, basically. That's more or less why he couldn't punish that habit.
I'm glad you took that one because that was a fantastic answer, Dan. You explained that really well. That was A+ stuff, man. Rhea, I'm not even going to add to that. I hope that answered it because that was perfect. Sound of Violence. The Pat Wyman pick would pick the big boys with the flash. Damn, I miss Wyman. Me too, man. I miss Patrick Wyman. He loved
Pat Wyman.
He loved the. He was like the guy. Pat Wyman was like the black dude in I Think You Should Leave with the little buff boy skit. Look at this little brick shit house. Look at this little brick shit house. He loved Cody Stamen, just bricked up dudes. That was his thing. Little brick shit houses. That was his. Little buff boys. When it was Douglas Da Silva de Andrade versus Cody Stamen, that was a perfect little buff boys fight because they're just so so jacked for the bantamweight. It's insane. Bodies of Men. Sorry. Bodies of Men. That should be a new podcast name. Rogan's commentary during the Ortega fight was one of the worst in a while, which is saying something. I must have been tuned out to that. Anything that you remember that was funny on commentary for that fight, Dan?
No, I was kind of focused on something Ortega was doing at the time, actually. The only piece of commentary I heard was from the corner, which was telling Ortega to do what they did versus Zombie, which worked perfectly, temporarily.
Yeah, that's probably one of the few good things. I was just worried because Tiki Gozan was in that corner. Yeah. This is earning it, Brian. Sorry.
Yeah, Ghost has a great comment. I agree with everything there. It's a great observation.
I just pulled it up. It looked like Ortega's commitment to the jab got him punished with low calf kicks. Even though Lopez wasn't doing anything cool, he was timing his plotting. Interesting. I'm sure I'll pick up that more on rewatch. Good comment there.
One thing I would add about Lopez to pay attention to, after Lopez counters, watch the slight beat he has for his one follow-up. Because Lopez really likes having a slight beat on the counter where you throw one and you have a slight waiting second, and then you throw the left hook after that. He's very good at it.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Yeah, his triggers, to your point earlier, were really sharp there. All right, next fight. Esteban Ribovic defeated Daniel Zellhuber. First, shouts to our guy Feno, who took the riskier pick and picked Ribovic, who, even though Zellhuber trains out of my gym, and Eric Nixick's in the corner, who I thought did a great job. Obviously, I had bias there. Zellhuber was the pick. I kept my money away from this fight, but I'm a big fan of Ribovic. He's an absolute capital B boy with his style. Another fighter who rips the body really well, more than Diego Lopez, but still not enough for my liking. Ghost talked about it. Feno talked about it, but when he does go to the body, boy, it's always to the end of fights for whatever reason, but it's amazing. Any thoughts on this fight, Dan?
This fight was fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Within 2 minutes, I kind of realized what kind of fight I was looking at. I was like, oh, this is like a periodical fight you get between two unranked guys that you're going to remember because it's so fun. And then round 3 happened, and round 3 became round of the year halfway through. We're jumping ahead, obviously, but earlier, Josh Van's fight earlier that night was pretty fucking crazy, and the fight beforehand was Rodriguez and Osborne was crazy, but it was kind of slop, so I'm a hipster elitist about that.
Sure, fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
This fight basically took both of those fights and made them look mediocre, by that point. But yeah, so about 11 minutes of just incredible two-way technical striking battles that really my friend Haxer Eyes put it best on Twitter. Hacksaw Eyes. I would definitely follow him for
Yeah,
more weirdness.
smart,
If you
real
can't,
smart.
yeah, if you can't stand people who talk like me, he talks like me.
You guys are both smart.
That's not good. Don't say that. So Hacksaw basically said that that's the fight you would show people who are like combat sports is all about meatheads fighting because it's like it does get to that point, but that's only after 11 minutes of like logical progression to it.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Oh, that's
So,
really well put.
but honestly, too much shit happened in this fight to even list half of it. To
It
be
it
honest.
it did, but the some of the swings and some it wasn't even the exact exchange. But you seem to be pick up what I was putting down as far as referencing Mark Hominick, Eve Jabouin, like some WEC action from back in the day.
I know my classics. I wouldn't have made that boxing list, but I know my MMA classics too, man. Yeah, God, that was really special seeing like two guys whose offensive and defensive abilities like synergize together to create a fight like that. Because while I think like Zellhuber was ahead technically, I think like those rounds were still pretty close. Because and I think the big reason why is because Zellhuber kind of had control of the range with the jab,
Yep.
but he wasn't landing as many clean shots upstairs as you would think because of like uh is it Rebovix? I'm very bad with names. Is it
I think so.
Rebovix?
I think so.
Rebovix's patterns as far as like his guard or in kind of like weaves off of it. But Rebovix was struggling to get anything done unless he was blitzing in. It's just Zellhuber kind of had an intercepting like things like knees, pulling the jab behind his shoulder as he throw it. Because like if you're a tall guy and you throw a jab out and you pull your shoulder like that as you L step or V step,
Uh-huh.
you're going to be a lot harder to counter that way for it. And so Rebovix kind of resigned himself to doing some things based upon the jabs. And so what sort of then happened was you just had this back and forth technical stuff where like both guys are ripping the body, creating setups off of that. Rebovix had great success figuring out that even though he couldn't like close the distance, he could punish the retreat with kicks to break the posture to keep the pursuit up. And towards the end of round two, Rebovix started jabbing with him, which I do think was a big deal as far as setting up the big chaotic sequence for him in round
Yeah.
three.
I agree. Not that it mattered, and not that I would expect you to be scoring. They were both, like you said, we should all agree it was
Who cares about the
it
scoring?
was
This fight fucking ruled.
it was competitive rounds. But to your point, I think it was the bigger shots. Like in round two, I didn't see the scorecards, but I'm guessing round two more than round one, even though they were both close. There were some big shots from Rebovich where I'm like, depends on where the judge was sitting on how they read that. But there's some really good registers from Rebovich that could be earning him some points here with the judges. So I liked what Eric was saying in the corner between round two and three. In other words, where
No, I
you
didn't
know,
listen to the corner, so that's definitely something I would love on rewatch if I
yeah.
get the chance to.
Well, it was one of those things where, like you said, I think we can all agree that it was close. So even though maybe more people on my timeline had Zellhuber up than not, I like that Zellhuber's corner was like too close for comfort. Those are too close for comfort, those rounds. And they want him to be smart behind the jab, obviously, but they also preached that urgency in the third. And again, I don't think that's what got him in trouble. I think it was more the tactical responses of the jabbing with him. And, again, Rebovich is a guy who I've always bet in round three or sprinkled on. I didn't this time. I stayed away from this fight, but you see why. Like, this is a guy who really builds himself into the fight. And round three is just like a super round for him, We were talking about Ortega earlier, who's had good round threes. Like, Rebovich actually has, like, an actual, like, logical build to a good round three in his fights. Like, he just gets better and better.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to get to the chat on this one, but if you want to add anything on that fight, feel free.
Random side comment, another classic nerd trivia. If you liked round three of that fight, you'll love Bermuda's Matt Grice if you go back about 10 years.
Yeah, great shout. Great shout. We're naming all the fun featherweight fights during this was actually a lightweight fight, but yeah, we're shouting some great featherweight fights. Let's see here. When we talked about this on Thursday, we also called Zell Hooper getting cross-countered when he double jabbed since he got stuck on the end of the lead foot. That's right. And you also called, which somebody shouted you, Ghost. Here, James Kendrick shouted it. I saw that Zell Hooper really is better double jabbing on the back foot. Yeah, I believe that was the read that Ghost made sure to say on the breakdown. I agreed as well. So shouts to Ghost on that one. We also talked about Ribbons going late. Rivix going late to the body, but he also squares up to do it so he can be put in a double collar tie. Yeah. Again, the offense was just playing off each other so well. I got to head out. Hope you all have a good Sunday morning. No worries. It is super late, so shouts to you, Alexander Volkar, friends. Great follow on Twitter, folks. All right, I'm going to push on from that one. Ronaldo Rodriguez defeated Ode Osborne. I was going to say it like Willem Dafoe from Spider-Man. Yeah, I don't disagree with the decision. And basically in this was a tough one as far as the gambling goes, because I had inside the distance. Rodriguez inside the distance was my biggest play, Dan. And I had him both, and I had him sprinkled to finish either in both in round 2 or round 3 because I knew it was going to be a tough first round. I didn't know it was going to be that tough. I got lucky that it even went right, so I can't complain too much.
That easily could have been stopped.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, absolutely. But I would also argue that, and it would have been, it's easy to argue this because it would have been like a 7-unit swing. It would have saved my night and then some. Oh my goodness. If you would have got the stoppage in round 2, because I had it in the round robin with Bahamundes inside the distance already cashed and ready to go. And I would argue round 2 was the round he came closest to getting the finish as far as the Rodriguez side of the fight goes. And he was almost too stuck on being on bottom and keeping that figure 4 lock that commentaries even impressed with. But for me, it was the same rule of thumb where I'm like, no, it's just like you guys were saying, Ode Osborne's going to tire himself out with a triangle. Well, body triangle works the same way. And I wanted to see, not just because as a bet, if I was cornering Rodriguez, I would have said the same thing. Dude, just let go of the body triangle, get on top, and punch. Like he was only a couple elbows and punches away from the ref stopping it already in round 2. And then he started hunting the submission for the finish. But again, just get on top and strike. Again, I know it's easier said than done, but whether we're seeing guys resting from the back position on bottom, or like Marab and detaching and completely going away, I'm like, just somebody hold the position and strike. Is that why Khabib Nurmagomedov was the GOAT? Because he just did the simplest fucking thing in the room? Because it wasn't flashy what he did, but he's doing what I'm complaining about and what most fighters don't. Just hold him down and strike. I don't care if you're going to just keep striking till either the fight ends or the round ends. Rinse, wash, and repeat, especially if that's your game, right? And so to your point, even putting the betting stuff aside just as a technical hipster, right? Like you kind of grade against these kind of slop things, right? It was a lot of there was a lot of mistakes. There were so many mistakes. As fun of a fight, there was just so many mistakes.
I can't talk about the grappling stuff, obviously.
Right.
I can only say something happened in that fight. You hope it was a miracle for whomever was involved, because both guys were probably concussed afterwards, is all I can say.
Oh yeah, Jesus.
Especially Rodriguez. Jesus Christ.
He went out.
I can say there's definitely some process concerns from both guys. I know it's been a while since I watched Osborne.
Sure.
I think for Rodriguez, I think the problem was he struggled with the guy who was faster than him. Maybe not more athletic than him, but faster than him. And so he tried focusing on dynamism to kind of like surprise his way back into it a bit. But Osborne kind of tried to be consistent, but he just kind of got scared a little bit by the other guy's dynamism himself. So it led to kind of an awkward third round after 10 minutes of chaos beforehand.
Yeah, that's a good way to explain it. But yeah, again, this was a classic thing where the read was there, and I'll take this shot any day of the week. It's one of my favorite dynamics, Dan, especially as far as where betting meets analysis. Is one of my favorite dynamics is when the first round finisher meets the really durable guy who comes on late.
Those are good.
Yeah, and it's good for entertainment value, right? And as far as which side I'm going to pick and which side I'm going to bet, again, bets, picks, and analysis are 3 different things, folks, right? But as far as the picks and bet goes, I do tend to side with the late the fighter to survive the storm and come on late. That side of the equation, right? So this is a dynamic that usually has worked out well for me, even when I'm on a bad streak. Because even when it doesn't work out, you can see the analysis was there. I mean, the dynamic was. It's not like I got the dynamic wrong. It just the finish didn't materialize on either side. Was the only thing. But yeah, Norma Dumont. Let's jump down to the or wait, real quick. Just a couple from the chat that we're gonna speed run through the prelims after this, folks. But I want to pay the respect to the chat. Kicking and punching range from Rodriguez. I saw the Zel Huber really is better. Oh, the Zab. Sorry. Jin Carasso. Sorry, James Kenter. I'm not sure if I got that. Jin Carasso. Are using body triangles tiring on the legs? Yeah, absolutely. Whether you're going for a triangle choke or a body triangle, both are tiring. Jim Carasso says, can you tire the person inside the body triangle since it's squeezing the body? That was the old school thought, like back in the day. I remember when I used to do sport karate and Kempo karate, and we would start doing grappling days in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. I don't know if this was because MMA was picky. This was before Tough and the UFC boom, so I don't know. But we would have grappling days and we would have boxing days as well, right? And on grappling days, whenever they taught the guard, that's one of the things they used to say, like, oh yeah, you could tire someone out, just make sure you're squeezing on them from there. Like that's what I love about like the popular martial arts making fun of traditional martial arts. I'm like, y'all came from the same fucking place and y'all are headed to the same place as these karate schools that you made fun of. So everybody chill. But yeah, that is something you will hear. I don't think it's a diminishing return in my book. Whatever you can tire somebody from squeezing them is not worth the amount of effort you would have to do to even, register on that scale.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not equipped to comment. Only thing I can think of that would make you maybe think that is Dustin Poirier getting a verbal submission from Anthony Pettis for that.
Yeah. That was
But that was also a freak accident fight.
Yeah,
and a half anyways.
Pettis is like, that's what I thought could happen to O'Malley here, to be honest, because again, fragile fighters, right? And that was more mechanics and like, if you're like body triangle and you have them flattened out from a rear mount, like that's super powerful. You can compress somebody's back like that. But again, I'm talking about compressing their back. I'm not talking about, squeezing the life out of them. So I think they overplay it a bit. Like it's definitely uncomfortable from a rear mount in general. But again, if you're doing it like Anderson Silva from full guard or like squeezing from someone's guard, like that whole woo talk, like that stuff's, and I'm not saying you're saying that, Jen, but I'm just answering that. All right, we're going to speed run through the prelims. Shout out to John Anik, who gave a Big Norm on the shout out. I know my guy Brian Petrie shouted Big Norm. I don't know who came up with that. I want to say it was Paul Shag from the Dogger Pass Pod. You know me, I always got to make sure I'm like shouting sources over here. But Brian Petrie got John Anik to pop on on his podcast earlier this week, and sure enough, on the broadcast, you could tell John Anik it was cooking, and he let out a Big Norm at the end. It wasn't a great fight from what I remember, but she won. Anything to say about this fight before we push on to the next one, Dan?
Aldana is always going to struggle cutting people off. Dumont literally knows how to pivot to a degree behind a jab. To an extent, but sometimes she'll switch as she throws too. And basically, she kept running into a wood chipper over and over again because she can't really cut the cage off at all.
Yeah.
And so this, I hope Amanda Nunes doesn't come back because I'm pretty sure Dumont would kind of make her really frustrated, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Next fight.
It was I think as far as Dumont's development, it was a good showing.
Yeah, it was for her. Next fight, Ignacio Bahamondes versus Manuel Torres. Didn't mean to be a dick coming off of this one, but it's just because, again, maybe it shouldn't have surprised me that people like Manuel Torres, because again, people, they love the first round finishers, right? They love the knockout. Back to the more, for lack of a better word, from the gen pop, right, to the betters, the more casual eye, so to speak. Everyone loves a first round finisher. Everyone loves a knockout artist, right? And that's fine, but this was another, again, my two money line plays that cashed were the only two underdogs that I picked, Dan. but they weren't really underdogs because I technically picked all favorites because Merab Dvalishvili and Bahamondes, even though they were my two only underdog picks, they actually opened as a favorite, which meant public money flipped the line. That said, the public said, you know what, odds makers and pros, you guys don't know what you're talking about. Sean O'Malley all day, which is fine, I get that. But for this one, they went Manuel Torres all day. Manuel Torres only has like 3 fights in the UFC or whatever. They're all within the first round. Like all his fights go to the first round except one regional sketchy split decision that he barely won against a can. And it was crazy. Like just and I guess I was hearing other people's analysis going like, oh, you're not gonna be able to do this with Manuel Torres. You're not gonna. And I'm like, how do you know Manuel Torres? How did any of us know Manuel Torres? Again, I'm not trying to be a dick. I just always blows my mind when people get so high over something we have so little evidence for. And the fact that I was, God forbid, on the right side for once, I was feeling myself a bit.
I think it's okay every once in a while to just pat yourself on the back. As long as you're always quick to go, here's how I was wrong.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true. And this one, was one of the few I was right, which was nice. But it was round 1, which I had Bahamondes round 2 and round 3 for my prop squad. I write for Action Network, and those were like we choose like high prop numbers, and I didn't quite get there. Again, this was another classic round prop where we were within 1 minute of getting there. That would have been a nice swing, perhaps would have made the difference as well tonight. Neither here nor there now, though. But technical side of the aspect goes, I tweeted this, Dan. At first, I was like, oh, look at Torres. I'm going to give him credit. He's fighting smart, coming out southpaw, trying to replicate past successes that we've seen fighters like Ludovic Klein have, and even others like, even though John McDessie mainly fights orthodox, he will, do the occasional shift or switch up. But yeah, I'm like, is he trying to find past successes? Okay, maybe he's more of a thinking man than I give him credit for. But then as soon as I had the thought, Dan, of, well, wait a minute, what's that old adage that even the commentary always says, right? Where it's, your defense ain't as good, though, in southpaw. And right as I said that, Bahamondes clocked him with a kick and then got him stumbling. And then later it was a counter punch. Both landed, by the way, when Manuel Torres, who always fights orthodox, was in southpaw, coincidentally enough.
Interesting, because when I was watching it, the big read Bahamondes made was because he kept putting his hands out like this for the hand fight, basically. And this is something you'll see a lot of fighters do. They bait the hand fight, basically leave the hand out. Oh, I want to play patty cake with you, basically. So he kept bringing out his hands. And so Torres is just like, oh, I can touch your hands in order to step in and force pressure on you. Now, what Bahamondes did was he realized, wait a minute, now I know where you are.
Yes.
And so he just did a slight hop step back and just countered him, and, well, he killed him twice.
That's great.
Because the ref probably should have stopped it on the first one.
Yeah, that's true, and that's great. No, that's absolutely true too. That tactic is great. That's the best part. Yeah, you diffuse. It's like a trick to diffusing the situation because it diffuses the anxiety that Bahamondes clearly and justifiably had against a big puncher, where you saw that uncomfortableness in boxing range. Well, how do you diffuse that? Take the initiative, right? You don't have to take it with strikes, right? You could take the initiative with that hand trapping, like what Dan said. So that's a great note there. But yeah, still happy to I'm glad I added Bahamondes because I wasn't. I had him inside the distance and as a pick for the podcast, but as far as adding him for an official play, not that it mattered because, I lost anyway, surprise, surprise. But, it helped stop the bleeding a little bit, I guess. Real Susan Truesdale, I was disappointed about the camera work around Norma Dumont. We did not get to see that massive behind on the Spears large screen. As a guy who is a fan of, fan of that. I feel you, buddy. I feel you. What can I say? James Kendrick, the analysis you guys had on Thursday was spot on for this one. Torres' defensive liabilities can be copy and pasted to Rodriguez. Yeah, absolutely. Except Torres, unfortunately, didn't survive. And even though he was given a leash as well. Again, back to what we were saying, right? But yeah, for whatever it's worth, the analysis was at least, spot on, which I don't feel as crazy on. Okay, Caitlin Souza defeated Yasmin Jauregui. Big upset here after some fouls. Um,
I did not see this one, so I don't
no
know anything about it.
no worries. I'll make this quick. The only thing I wanted to say was there was a bunch of fouls, and you had the awkward when it's a low blow in women's fights, and it's all male commentary, and no one knows what to say, right? And
Right.
so there, and again, we've got DC and Joe Rogan taking the stage, right? So, of course, we end up with the Diamond Cup. Someone should make new gloves conversation, but for women's body parts. Joe Rogan adapted that typical thing, and he was like, they should make one though, not like diamond. He's like, but for women, and it got really awkward. And he's like, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know what to do, but I bet Trevor Whitman would. Trevor, get on it. And then all of a sudden, it's like smash cut to Trevor Whitman in his gym office, going, all right, Joe, I'm on it. And then the camera quickly zooms out to reveal Pat Barry, who's like, I'll cover the youth fittings, Trevor. Sorry. Predator Pat.
That's okay.
Sorry.
All right, wait, everybody, alert. We're done. Everybody, clear out. We're done.
Predator Pat. Sorry, that's where my mind went. I'm like, oh God, don't. Oh geez, sorry. Terrible joke, but that's
okay. I don't care. I've had way worse, and my job makes me.
Yeah.
Believe me, you can't bother me.
Okay. Yeah, of course I have to have the Predator Pat joke pop up into my head. But it's just always funny. They always get so awkward about that. But yeah, Haudegi got caught with a shot. And then the classic club and sub, and she went out like Holly Holm did to Misha Tate punching. Next fight, Josh Van defeated Edgar Chairez. So when I do my round robins untracked, I know I'm speaking in heavy gambling parlance here, but I couldn't take things like Bahamundes inside the distance, so like I had to pick a round. Choose Parker. Picked round 3. We didn't get there. I did pick round 3 with Josh Van. Not that it would have mattered, but I felt like I was like, ooh. And I was getting excited because if you look at it, like we were lucky to even get to round 3 because Josh Van almost has Chairez out of there with body shots and assaults in round 2, right? After a sketchy round 1 and beginning of round 2 for Van, by the way. And whenever you bet, a fight to end in a certain round, and your fighter is like kicking the other fighter's ass and they barely make it to that round, that's like your ideal circumstances. Like you probably sweat. You're like, don't stop it yet. But it's your ideal circumstances. You're like, oh, the guy's, especially a guy like Josh Van, who we just talked about. He's like an Esteban Ribovics, where like he's a round 3 guy. He's a guy where you sprinkle on that round 3, right? And I'm all licking my lips. And sure enough, we don't get it. And it makes sense. He took the fight on short notice. In the post-fight, Josh Van says, I ran out of gas there. And before I throw it back to you for this fight, but because of that, I feel like I've been there so many times, whether it's the earlier fight where it was like the Bahamundes Torres were like, oh, I was so close to getting into round 2. Come on, almost there. Or it's set up to end and then it doesn't. So when Rodriguez, Lazy Boy, who I had bet in round 2 and round 3, when he gets absolutely nuked by Osborne in round 1 and the fight's almost going to be stopped, I'm like, you know what? This is where I catch the round 2. This is how it's supposed to. Maybe it's the opposite setup, if that makes sense. If you're following me, folks, and we almost did get the round 2, but anyways,
guys, Dan is basically making the long-winded explanation for why he's okay with people dying in the cage.
Pretty much, yeah. As long as
That's okay.
As long as the money's right, which is not. But yeah, it didn't matter, folks. Basically, no matter what my line of thought was here. But this was a fun fight, though. This was a really fun fight.
This was really good. I caught this one about an hour after it happened, but
okay.
Yeah, I do have a little bit to say on this one. This is actually the last one I have things to say about. So Van's very interesting, very talented prospect, but Ghost just pointed out, left hook into the overhand. Yes. So here's the thing about this little fight here. So Josh Van, I'm going to start with I'll just explain this whole fight, what happened. So Van struggles with kicking range at first, because Chairez keeps fending him off with like knees to set him up.
Yeah.
And so basically, whenever it's just a pure straight line center line fight where it's like this, like everything's on a center line, and it's not going well for Van at first. Later it becomes a problem for the opponent, but we'll get to that. So what happens is Van basically realizes, okay, if I jab into a slight L step, like jab like slightly as I move, I can slowly force him to reset. And then I can adjust that by going into the slip left hook to the body, which then sets up like the overhand off of that, which is one of Josh Van's favorite things to do. And he completely fucks him up with it, which leads to a hilarious sequence where basically the ref makes a double mistake, where basically Charles grabs the back of the fence.
Yes, yeah.
And while that's happening, Van is punching the back of his head.
Yes.
And so using the fence to stand up, he transitions to a spinning back fist, which hurts Van.
Yes.
And that whole sequence is both awesome and encapsulating the fight in a nutshell.
Yes. Oh, my God.
But anyways, so both guys have to get some bearings back, which leads to the third. So Suarez is in hell because he hates the body shot. So what he does is, and I actually think this is kind of interesting, when he throws back, he starts like weaving with his hips, like coming down. And so like it looks like a really awkward, like he's throwing back in a panic but trying to weave because he does not want to get hit to the body again. And but it works because they're back on the center line. And so because he's throwing so much out as Van does, as he manages to hurt Van again. But then Van basically figures out that so as soon as I go back to like turning you, I get back into it, and Van takes round 3 after like some pretty dicey stuff. But yeah, the fight's just like, it's a pretty chaotic shootout. It was really fun. But yeah, Josh Van's an interesting case because like he's super talented, but he kind of has that Shane Burgos syndrome where his defense is like really problematic.
Yeah,
especially center line and moving his head.
Kickers too.
Yes, for sure. And the other thing is how Van allocates his adjustments. They're almost never defensive. They're always offensive. And it's kind of a problem, and it's already a problem because he's getting hurt. And the thing is, Shane Burgos had a hell of a chin and wasn't necessarily getting hurt the way Van was. So Van's young. He's 22, and someone just pointed out in chat, like, yeah, he fought like 60 days ago after being finished. So yeah. There's some things that probably need to change. That's not really good. There's a whole officiating side,
management.
But
I was gonna say management. The fact he shouldn't have been fucking in this fight. To be honest, just who the fuck's managing you? His fight.
The fight was great, but it shouldn't probably have happened.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm a fan of Van, but again, being critical, fight IQ, the leg locks, which we've seen before. I will say, in his corner, surprisingly smart, which is not always the case when it's a fighter, right? Just because you're a good fighter doesn't mean you're a good teacher. Especially when, we talk about fighter tendencies and how they translate to their coaching, may or may not, like with Diego Lopez de Grasso, right? But Daniel Pineda, who's longtime UFC, two stints in the UFC, he's in the corner of Van, and super smart stuff. He's like, we're not going for knockout punches, we're going for body punches, and he was keeping him on the right track. So I just want to say that, and then just to push on so we can get out of here. In the last fight, we had Raul Rosas Jr. versus Richie Lang, the Mongolian Murderer. Pretty straightforward. That's how his. Have you heard his translator?
No.
It says he sounds just like this. He sounds like this. And he goes, Richie Lang, the Mongolian Murderer, and it was hilarious because at the presser, like it was all like cheering and Dana White, bro, fast in Mexico, yeah. And
he sounds like a Hitchcock monster.
Yeah,
antagonist.
He is, and his name, and the way he talks to, not just the nickname, because he's at this press conference, right? And I was talking about this on the last podcast, so forgive me, but like Dan, he legitimately did a death threat. Like, they asked him, like, he's fighting the teenage kid Raul Rosas who just got out of high school, and Mongolian Murderer's like, I plan to become the first murder in the sphere, and I will be the first person to murder a Mexican fighter. And it just nobody, and thankfully nobody gave a shit about him being there as like the one Asian dude.
Oh,
So it went
good.
dead. Like it felt. And I was talking to, I actually did meet up with Aaron and some other the media guys that were there, and they said the same thing. They're like, "Wait, did he just do a death threat?" But I'm like yeah. I'm like, did it just fall dead? Like everybody there, and people that were there were like, yeah, apparently it did. But it was hilarious. It was just like the translator who speaks like that is like, Richie Long says he would like to murder Ronald Rosas, and they're like, all right, the next, I have a question for the Chihuahuas guy. Like they just completely just no one even acknowledged it. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like he could have been like, okay, next question for Richie Long.
Excellent segue there.
Yeah,
We're very proud of you. We need to distract from one disturbing voice to the other disturbing voice.
Yeah, or I love it when they don't even like listen to this is like a bad media person where they don't listen to the answer, Dan, and they just go right to their next question, right? And, like they don't even take this, so they'll give like an answer like that, and instead of like addressing it for a follow up, they'll be like, okay, so with the win this Saturday, who are you gonna call out next? And then we'll reach along. I have planted a bomb under all of your seats. It will go off if the decimal level reaches above 7.5. Like, okay, that's great. I got a question for, like, no one's listening to him. Like, he's trying to commit a terrorist act.
It's great what you just said because it reminds me of a Bill Burr stand-up where he's talking about, like, politically, like, getting into character where he goes, if I was running for president, I'd have everyone put a survey under every desk. If you forgot a pencil, you're already out. Or just to the next level.
Yes. Well, he could have done that too, and again, it would have just fallen empty. Like they weren't even like that was that was the comedy.
We went from James Bond. We went from a James Bond villain. Now we need to go to the opposite extreme for children. Chihuahuas. Great.
Oh yeah, that's what it was. It was just like he sits there and like delivers a cold line, and nobody like responds to it, and then the other guy goes, Chihuahua! And everybody's just like, they're stabbing each other, just losing their mind. That's where our society's at, basically. While the other guy's like, please evacuate. I have planted a bomb under the 5th row of the... Like, he could have been saying anything, which was great. This guy can say anything. No one cares. Nobody cares.
We digress. So, anyways, back to...
Yeah, he lost Richie Long, so he did not murder. Raul Rosas won a decision. I don't really have anything else to say from that. Did you watch this one, Dan?
I did not. It was that and the Souza fight were the only two I didn't see.
Okay, no worries. Let me clean up the chat and then we'll get out of here. This was fun, even with the sidetrack tangents and the Predator Pat with the youth fittings, as Sammy Arnett says in the chat. Shout out, Predator Pat. Predator Pat. Wasn't that sounds like it was his actual nickname? I think it was HD, but I think Predator Pat is way better, more appropriate. Fan a bunch breakdowns. Yeah. Jesus Christ! Can we give a shout out to Josh Van's left hook into the overhand?
Yeah. Oh, we already talked about that. Yeah, I brought it up.
Yep, no and the body jab started throwing it around. Yeah, absolutely. Rios and Truesdale, we talked about the 63 days turnaround for Josh Van. He looked himself, but still concerning. Though, yeah, we talked about that. Very concerning. And then Fan Front Dan A talked about Shane Burgos' comparison to Van, and I think that's perfect. Yeah, great comparison. And great for you guys joining us. Please hit the like button if you haven't already. Appreciate that. That stuff helps and stuff. I'll get the previews up. We're going to edit out that beginning part, unfortunately, for my guy Feno, but we'll have him on next week, folks, and I'm sure if he missed anything he wanted to say, he can say it there, too. So
I just want to set the record straight that Feno is way prettier than me and actually knows what he's watching on ground stuff, so you should definitely follow him. He's one of the hardest workers in this whole game, and every support matters. And if you support him, he also makes fun of me relentlessly on Discord and everywhere I go. So to the point that I think him being mad at me isn't sarcasm. So just keep that in mind.
Feno, stop being mad at Dan, even though you are a beautiful creature. Dan is right. But yeah,
Feno's not mad at me.
Dan, you are a beautiful. Well, you're a beautiful creature as well, man. And I really appreciate you joining me for this. This was fun. Got to get you on more anytime, man. It's like one of those things. Like I wasn't sure because you doing. I wasn't sure if you're doing the MMA retirement thing where you retire but you're back. Which is fine. I do it too.
I'm doing this thing based upon at this point. This is what I'm doing. I'm not doing any like technical write up project unless I want to, which is never going to happen anytime soon. But I'll do pods, I'll make threads, etc. I am just, it's not the highest priority, but I'm gonna pretend I'm retired for like 5 minutes and then come back. And it's called the Terry Funk tribute. For those of you who don't know who Terry
Nice. That's sorry. Go ahead.
For those of you who don't know who Terry Funk is, he's a professional wrestler who kept taking his retirement and coming back.
I love that reference. That was A+ reference here. James Kendrick says, Feno, stop making fun of Dan A. Dan A has been retired for 15 minutes. Yeah, it's okay. I feel like I come back to you.
It was actually 8. It was actually 8. Please.
My last retirement, which is not really retirement because it's like true. It's like I do want to find a way off Twitter, and one way or another, I may that may happen anyways. If as my time seems to be running short for covering the sport, we'll see, Dan. So like these things, this has been true for years now. By the way, since I started this, regardless of it has nothing to do with the gambling either. Well, it does because I'm gambling on myself. With this whole job, right? So this is just kind of part of the package. So I guess it wasn't a fake retirement or anything like that in my defense, but just getting really pissed and emotional about it like a couple weeks ago and saying it's like definitely getting out of here. I didn't even bother to look. I saw the numbers drop, but I think I lost like at least 400 followers just from that one semi-fake retirement, which wasn't a fake retirement or a retirement. But yeah, so. I don't know. People get upset with that, but not with you though. We're happy to see you, Dan. I'm happy to see you here, and so yeah, forgive me. That's not my excuse. It's a legit excuse, but I say it to bring it up that a lot of you folks, if you're like, I don't know if Dan's mad at this Dan Tom's mad at me, or he's not inviting me on the program. If you've been on a guest before, chances are I'm just busy and I'm trying to actually do more guests because I like this better. I think you guys like it better. I think it's better for the show. It's less for me. That's what I know. It's more booking, but less hearing from me a little, which is worth it. So I'm gonna try to do that. But sometimes all you gotta do is reach out, like Dan Albert did here, and he's just like, dude, I miss you. I want to come on the pod sometime. Like, brother, that's all you had to say. So always open invitation, Dan.
I didn't realize at first it was gonna be Fenio, him, and I. I thought that was going to be eventually, so it led to a whole funny saga where Fenio decided to fuck with me before the show and. He was pissed at me for trying to replace him.
Son of a bitch.
And then I find out like 2 minutes in, and I was like, "Oh, okay, we're okay," because he's an asshole.
And then and then you did replace him because he had to leave. No, I'm just kidding. But
yeah, fucking bitch.
Follow Dan at TypewritingDA on the artist formerly known as Twitter. Follow me at Dan Tom MMA. At Dan Tom MMA is also the channel, for on YouTube. Dan Tom MMA, which is also the Substack address. So it's all simple. Dan Tom MMA. If you're on Instagram and you want to lurk me there, just throw some underscores in the appropriate places, and I should pop up. So that's it. No need to plug anything else. Thank you guys for the super chats, for the likes, all the support. I don't deserve it, that's for damn sure, but I do appreciate it, despite my curmudgeoniness, despite my fake retirements. But right now, you got 2 Dans here, so hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I enjoyed Dan. I enjoyed you guys. So until next time, protect your neck.